So you're wondering, Val, you can't possibly have another type of foreshadowing. And I do. I said I loved foreshadowing. Did I say that foreshadowing is my favorite thing as a writer and a reader? Because it is. And one of the ones that I feel I cannot do, and you're going to feel that way about some of these that I've shared, is the mislead the reader. Now, I mentioned earlier that this often might get confused with what could come to pass. What could come to pass explores different paths or different love interests, and it ties the end with a nice little plot, like P.S. I love you. Like, that's not going to happen, but then that door opened because they showed that what could come to pass had a stopping point where it was no longer possible until the true plot, what will come to pass, an unfolding of plot, could be revealed, right? And again, back to make sure you're mixing a couple of these foreshadowings in your storytelling in a single book because it increases immersion. But misleading or mislead the reader is a very special foreshadowing that is aimed for tricking the reader. And I will say that one of the genres that do this well, and it's part of how they deliver their stories, is psychological thrillers and horror. Both of those, often psychological horror, occult horror, anything where you're questioning whether you're reading it right or if the character's seeing it right. It's that classic, and you've probably heard this term before, the unreliable narrator, right? And it keeps the reader second guessing. And that in itself, again, builds a good amount of anxiety, right? And anticipation. Your reader starts to be cautious. And like I said, this style of foreshadowing and writing and plot device can be very difficult to write. Gillian Flynn is probably one of the best examples, and that's with Gone Girl. If you've not read this to experience an unreliable narrator or misleading of the reader experience it, and it being a big impactful part, that is a great example. And at the same point, you have to be very cautious with this type because you have to watch for loose ends. No matter which of these foreshadowing mechanics you're blending and mixing and utilizing or identifying in your own work, you always want to tie up your loose ends. If you're hinting at a thing, you have to show that it's not plausible on some way. And that's the importance of understanding your foreshadowing that you're using within your plot, because it can kick open doors or leave doors cracked that you're going to have to shut as the climax and the end of the story comes up. That doesn't mean you have to wait till that point to close those doors. You can open a door and immediately slam it closed and lock it up and make it go away into another realm by the very next paragraph or very next chapter. But make sure you're closing these up. And especially when you're misleading a reader, you have to find more creative ways of closing that. If you're into psychological thrillers and things, this goes back to that age-old piece of advice as authors get, and it's also in Stephen King's On Writing, is read your genre. You're not reading your genre to steal from your fellow authors. No. If you're writing to a certain audience, you need to know how the audience is expecting and wanting you to craft, right? It's a study of craft. When a carpenter goes in and he's there to build cabinets, and then he's thrown over to making boats, he's not going to come in and start making cabinets because everyone making a boat or asking for a boat gets a cabinet, and he's like, here's a cabinet because that's what I do. And I'm going to be like, this is supposed to be a boat, right? That's what it can come off as if you're not paying attention to your audience and how to write to your audience. So mislead the reader is a sensation that the author sees the reader, right? You're like, hey, I see you reading there. You think you got this. You think you're seeing this level. But what if I'm lying to you? Or What if this character that you're strapped into like a roller coaster ride, it was supposed to be a roller coaster. What if it's a speed train to another country around, right? It's that unknown aspect, and that's where the anxiety builds with this type of foreshadowing. It's the fact that the loose ends and the second guessing are very open, and it's like walking down a narrow cliff and there's no safety net, right? If you fall to the right, you might just land in soft grass that's just right there that you for some reason couldn't see because the fog was so thick. But you fall to the left, you're going in for miles of a fall, and then you may not recover from it. And a lot of the climaxes feel like that. Like you hit that big climax, that big reveal, and they mislead the reader, and you're like, son of a gun, like, oh my god, like, you know. And sometimes, you know, these can be specifically for a character in the story, or it could be how the story is told, right? You know, how reliable is Dexter, really, when he's supposed to be a good guy and a detective, but he's also a serial killer and there's a conflict of interest? That would be misleading the reader. This is supposed to be the hero, the detective of the story, but he's also a killer, and then you have them second guessing the morality, right? So that's a great, and then they have to like be cautious, and it starts building that cautiousness, and then you're like watching for loose ends, like how long is he going to be a serial killer killing bad guys before he needs to expand, because he's profiling and you're learning all this information about serial killers, and you're wondering, when is he going to be impacted by these stages as well, right? So there's that anticipation again. Good foreshadowing is constantly building this anxiety anticipation, and this is, like I said, this is mislead the reader. Definitely read Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn if you want something to watch. There's an anime movie called Perfect Blue that, good luck trying to guess who, what, when, where, and it's some good times.